It's not looking good for sellers this spring. Market conditions are slowing and buyers are gaining the upper hand real fast. In fact, according to Redfin, in the first quarter, nearly half of all home sales had seller-paid concessions. That's a lot of sellers having to sweeten the deal just to get the home sold. Now, that amount actually is down from last year, but what's more telling is how many sellers are also having to stack concessions on top of price cuts. Within the 3-month period ending in March of this year, Redfin found that 21.5% of sellers gave concessions and sold below their list price. Another 16.2% gave concessions and had to drop their price, and nearly 10% gave concessions, dropped the price, and still sold for less than asking. Now, if we look back a little bit this past fall, sellers had it pretty good. Mortgage rates had dropped, buyers flocked into the market just like they always do, and median sales prices in December were almost as high as they were in June. Builders were very quickly raising their prices. Well, fast forward to now, and it's a different ballgame. Spring came with big tariff news, and the stock market had some wild swings in response. Consumer confidence took a hit, and many buyers hit the pause button. Now we've come from a busy fall, an average winter, and suddenly into a really slow spring and almost summer now. And this is not a good thing for our sellers. Concessions and price drops aren't the only thing shifting in the market either. March saw 15.7% of pending sales fall through, up slightly from the same time last year. And it begs the question, why are we seeing so many more failed transactions? It could be buyer nerves or bad inspection results. It could be a home sale contingency and the buyers just couldn't sell their home. Maybe they could no longer qualify for a mortgage due to losing a job or some other reason. There are a whole host of reasons why contracts fall through, and even if we don't know the exact cause, the rising numbers tell us one thing for sure. All right, sellers are starting to lose leverage in this market. The irony is that despite all of this data, sellers are somehow not aware of this. Real Estate News explains years of rapid home price growth have trained sellers to price high, but the market has shifted, leading to a widening gap between seller asks and buyer offers. In fact, in a recent poll, Realtor.com shows a solid 81% of potential sellers expressed optimism about getting their asking price or more when they decide to list their home. Seems that with all of the inflation and sky-high home prices back in your early 2020s, sellers just can't wrap their heads around a market shifting more towards buyers having the upper hand. And also, okay, you have to think about how volatile the Dallas market has been. Fall was decently good to sellers, and now suddenly spring very much isn't. Redfin recently published an article titled, "The Typical Home Seller Wants $39,000 more than the typical buyer is willing to pay." That's a pretty large financial gap. Redfin comments that the prices home sellers are asking for and the prices home buyers are paying haven't been this out of whack since the start of the pandemic. If you want to see that in data form, it's about a 9% gap between listing prices and sold prices. According to Redfin, the difference hasn't been that large since May of 2020. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's not necessarily buyer leverage that's creating this gap. It's the sellers who are doing it. The gap is growing so significantly because list prices are rising more than twice as quickly as actual sales prices. The data shows that median list price growth is on the rise more than it has been since September of 2022, a 6.2% increase. But get this, the median sales price growth is only 2.5%. Apparently, the growth hasn't been that small since September of 2023. Redfin states that the last time list price growth outpaced sale price growth by this much was July 2020, when the pandemic home buying frenzy fueled fierce bidding wars empowering sellers to price high. All the data keeps stating the same thing. We haven't seen activity like this since 2020. But it goes to show that now, 5 years later, we have a ton of unhappy sellers who bought in that hot market and didn't expect the market to have changed so much. For our buyers, I do want to caution you that there's some overpriced real estate in the market right now. As a buyer, you really need to be aware of that if you're squeamish of making the lowball offer. With an overpriced home, what seems like a lowball offer may actually be an offer at market value. You can't let an overpriced home intimidate you. The seller does not govern what a home is worth based on what they price it for. So lately, we have found ourselves telling buyers more and more often that the home they're interested in is overpriced. With all of these unhappy sellers, some Dallas sellers are in a lot more trouble than others. And if you're a buyer, I want you to keep that in mind because it could present an opportunity for you. For example, think about sellers who bought at the height of the market in 2022. If you remember, prices went up rapidly between 2020 and the first half of 2022. Homeowners from before 2020 have this nice cushion of equity because they benefit from that rapid price increase. But homeowners who bought at the height in 2022, they don't have that luxury at all. All right, they paid at the very highest amount. Now, granted, all right, they probably secured a 3% mortgage, which is nothing to sneeze at, but talk about your lock-in effect. They don't have enough equity to cover the closing costs to sell and to buy. So if they don't have to sell, okay, if it's purely discretionary, these sellers are better off staying put. And if you're one of those homeowners, okay, this is probably not gonna be the time to sell. But let's talk about sellers who bought during that time who don't have a choice. One of those could be our sellers who bought with a 2-1 buy down and now they can't afford their rate. In mid-2022, we saw a dramatic increase in interest rates that slowed the housing market way down. Builders began offering 2-1 buy downs to try to compensate for the loss of buying power. If you're not familiar with what that is, Investopedia gives us a great definition. It says a 2-1 buy down is a mortgage agreement that provides a low interest rate for the first year of the loan, a somewhat higher rate for the second year, and then the full rate for the third and later years. So when buying power suddenly became a great issue, all the agents and loan offers began suggesting to marry the house and date the rate, with the assumption that rates would come down and you could always refinance. As a buyer in 2023, they had their low rate that first year. Then in 2024, it went up slightly, and in 2025, it's at its full amount. So if those buyers based their budget on the final amount, then they're fine right now. But the ones who couldn't afford the full amount and banked on, refinancing, they're in some serious trouble now because rates haven't gone down to any substantial degree. In November of 2022, rates were at 7.08%. Well, here we are in May of 2025 and rates are around 6.76%. So not enough of a decrease to justify the closing costs required to refinance. In the meantime, taxes and possibly insurance have also gone up. So the 2-1 buy down, it can be an effective tool as long as you can very comfortably afford the final payment. But otherwise, it can be dangerous. Don't make your decision with the assumption that you'll be able to refinance at a lower rate. Another group of sellers who are in particular trouble are those who over-customize their new build homes. Now, this one is a biggie. With an inventory home, you negotiate your price and that's it. But when you build from the ground up, it is so easy to get carried away with all of the options for improvements. But every little thing costs extra. And once you get in that design center, all right, you really tend to over improve beyond what the home is even worth. Now here we are in 2025 where we haven't seen rapid price appreciation and many owners have gorgeous upgraded homes that they can't sell for what they put into them. In fact, we saw a home like this very recently. I mean, it was gorgeous, like clearly a custom home with all kinds of extras, like way more than there should have been. In May of 2023, 2 liens for a total amount of $758,530 were recorded on the home. And we don't even know what the actual purchase price was since it was a custom home, but even if the buyer didn't put in any down payment at all, they paid at least $758,000. If you look at comparable sales at the time, you would be looking at a suggested list price in the $670,000 range. But our buyer probably upgraded everything and ended up with loans over $758,000 on a home, right, with a suggested list price of $670,000. Fast forward just over a year to August of 2024, and for whatever reason, our homeowner is in trouble and has to sell. So he lists the home for $799,000. Like, all he's trying to do here is cover his closing costs, but it is priced way above market value and the listing expires without a buyer. Now, fast forward again to 2025, and our homeowner is still in trouble. And this time he lists the home as a short sale. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a short sale is, Investopedia gives us a great definition. A short sale in real estate is an offer of a property at an asking price that is less than the amount due on the current owner's mortgage. So the home closes in April of 2025 as a short sale for the purchase price of $681,000. Now remember, in May of 2023, market sales suggested a list price of $670,000. 2 years later, it sold for $681,000. All right, so $11,000 in increased value. And you can see in this situation, it's not that the market has crashed or anything like that. The market has gone up at a modest pace, just like it should. It's just that our custom home buyer got carried away at the design center and spent too much on upgrades. And as a result, he owed more than the home is worth and he had to sell through a short sale. As a buyer, if you are planning on building from the ground up, you have to be strategic, and it's gonna take some self-control too. You've got to recognize that you are looking at a formula of base price plus lot premium plus upgrades. So have your maximum price in mind, as well as what you'd like to spend on upgrades, and then work backwards from there. For example, if your final budget is $700,000 and you'd like to spend $50,000 for upgrades, your base price plus lot premium needs to not exceed $650,000. But don't just go in prepared with the numbers, all right? Understand that the design center is going to be incredibly tempting, so be prepared to be disciplined as well. Another situation we're seeing a lot of is sellers who have to compete with new construction. With sales going down in general, builders are pulling out all the stops right now to get their homes sold. Now, individual homeowners are not going to be able to compete with offering a home that's never been lived in, and upgrades or fixed interest rate incentives of 4%. Plus, builders can afford to lose money on some houses while making profit on others. Well, individual sellers don't have that luxury. Just to be clear, this isn't going to impact every seller. Not all suburbs are threatened by new construction. Some suburbs are landlocked and they're only going to have pre-owned homes. Your best ones are suburbs set up like that have other benefits going for them as well. All right, for example, Plano has little, if any, new construction, but it offers something that new construction can't, right? A shorter commute. The reality of Dallas life is that plenty of the labor force has been called back to the office, and commute times are a real factor in buying a home now. The new construction exurbs are no longer an option for as many people as they were. I mean, imagine commuting to downtown Dallas, right? An hour-long commute probably isn't something they're willing to do. Plus, Plano is one of those suburbs that are landlocked, right? So new construction can't really be built there. With a suburb like Plano, it's not going to be in direct competition with new construction, and it offers something that new construction can't. You have other suburbs, though, where pre-owned homeowners are in a lot of trouble. The worst situation for a seller is when they're within the specific subdivision where a ton of new construction is built. I mean, even being near new construction is bad news for your sale. In fact, I want to show you some data to help you see this. We have many exurbs that are an absolute explosion of new construction. We're talking exurbs like Salina, Princeton, Royce City, those. Then you have suburbs that are landlocked but offer a short commute, okay? And then we're talking about like Plano, Richardson, Irving, okay? If we take a look at the numbers, our pre-owned homes competing with new construction are in a lot of trouble. For example, in Salina, your month's supply for pre-owned homes is 8.7. Okay, that's up 141.7%. In Princeton, your month's supply is 8.1. Okay, that's up 118.9%. In Royce City, your month supply is 7.5, and that's up 53.1%. In Forney, your month's supply is 8.2, and that's up 46.4%. But then if we take a look at our landlocked suburbs, right, the ones that offer a short commute, all right, we have Plano. The month's supply there is 3.3, and that is up 73.7%. Then for Richardson, month supply 3.7. It's up 117.6%. Then we have Irving, okay, and your month supply is 4.2, which is up 75%. Farmers Branch, your month supply is 3.4, which is up 9.7%. And then you have Carrollton, where your month supply is 3.1, which is up 93.8%. So if we compare pre-owned homes in new construction exurbs versus landlocked suburbs with short commutes, you can see month supply is up across the board. But what a difference in our landlocked pre-owned homes. They're not constantly losing out to new construction. So where does this leave our buyers and sellers? Well, if you're considering selling and it's just discretionary, all right, this would be a time I would recommend not selling. And I know that flies against everything you would expect to hear from a realtor, but I always want to be honest with you. Now, if you're in a position where you have to sell, all right, stage your home well. Consider pricing it slightly below market value, and then consider compensating buyer agents competitively. Also, open as broad a window as you can to acceptable showing times. I mean, basically make it as easy and seamless as you possibly can to get as many buyers in the door as possible. If you're a seller in trouble, all right, for whatever reason you owe more on your home than it's worth, or you've gotten behind on your payments, definitely research and consider requesting a short sale from your lender. Another option is you could turn your home into a rental. You could also rent out rooms of your home to help you with your payment while you're still living there. Now, buyers, we've discussed how seller concessions are up, pending sales falling out of contract are up, and sellers are having to lower their prices. All of this falls back to where are all of the buyers? Well, Scott Helfstein, head of investment strategy at Global X, answers this one for us in a nutshell. The reality is that corporate earnings have been pretty strong. The U.S. economy is barreling along, and the biggest cause for concern is sentiment. Advisor Perspectives agrees, sharing how consumer sentiment fell for a fourth straight month in April as ongoing economic uncertainty and inflation worries continue to drag down consumer attitudes. Now, if you're feeling uncertain about your job or finances, it is completely understandable that this market would feel unsettling. But if you're in a stable position, all right, this could actually be one of the best times to buy, all right, because consumers are feeling uncertain, and that puts sellers in a vulnerable spot. Buyers have the advantage they haven't seen for a long time. Now, I told you earlier, if you're thinking about selling but you don't have to, that it's better to wait. I'm gonna be honest, in the same token, typically I tell my buyers to wait until the fall if they have that luxury because of seasonal price drops, but this year is a bit unique, okay, and I wanna tell you why. Dallas is very rate sensitive, and by that I mean it doesn't take much rate movement to bring buyers out of the woodwork. The general consensus seems to be that the Fed will lower rates before the end of the year. So for that reason, I'm foreseeing a busier fall than usual, juxtaposed against our current slower spring than usual. What I can tell you is we've been making aggressively low offers lately and seeing them accepted. I mean, if you can picture a seller who goes a full month without a single showing, then we bring in a highly qualified buyer but with a low offer. It's no surprise that sellers are listening like they've never listened before. I mean, they simply don't have other options. Now, we're seeing that sellers are in trouble, but you may have noticed the one seller we didn't talk a whole lot about is our home builder. I didn't dig into that too much in this video because I've already made a separate video about their plight, and you can watch it right here. In the meantime, this is Wendy Pinnell, and I'll catch you on the next video.